Well, Nadine, it's been a whole week since I've seen you SRS in Strasbourg. How are you?
I'm really well. How are you?
I'm doing well. And thoughts on the show? Let me get right out of the gate with that, and then we'll talk about the phenomenal period Proximie is having right now.
Well, first of all, what's always great about SRS is you get to reconnect with so many friends and colleagues in the industry, and this, of course, didn't disappoint from that perspective. Um, it wasn't as big as some of the U.S. ones I've been to in the past, but it definitely still had the buzz, the excitement, and the feeling of an industry really making great advances. It was just so great to see that kind of mix of industry, physicians, individuals like you know, thought leaders, drivers of the categories, disruptors, and just such a broad range of solutions and technologies out there. Every time I go to SRS, I'm amazed at how many more robots are being built and how many more subcategories are being designed within that. And I think for us, it was really incredible. I mean, we had a sort of small team out there, but it was super busy. It was nonstop, and it was clear that we were a solution and a platform that was there to serve everyone, to serve the healthcare systems, to serve the OEMs, and to serve our physician users. And we had a great chance to sort of showcase that both on the panels, but at our stand as well. And it was pretty much nonstop conversations for 4 days.
And one of the things that I've been chatting about for years in the category you're in is I always thought it got there a little earlier than the industry was able to digest it. And I call it, the last one standing. And, Proximity continues to be at the top of that hill as others have absolutely either left the stage or others are struggling in there. But you've been on a good run over the last year and a half, and even a couple announcements very recently.
It is, I mean, definitely, I'm very proud of what we've built so far in the team. And that is down to, so many incredible supporters and champions, including you and your whole team. And it is amazing when we started this. I distinctly remember the phone call you and I had, I think I want to say like 8 years ago. And I was pitching this idea, and it was, perhaps at the time more of a fringe idea. And it's amazing to see now, and I know you and I talked about this at SRS, how it went from being, experimental, disruptive at the edges to inevitable strategic imperative and expectation. The sense is clear. It's no longer a matter of if, um, it's when, it's how do we get this, it's how do we make this available to all. And for us, it was clear across both the conference, but I think more generally that whilst we created the category, we've, I think, cemented the category there now. And we know, look, we appreciate digitizing operating rooms and procedure rooms is complex. It's not straightforward. There's multiple stakeholders. You have to deal with highly variable workflows, teams, entrenched systems. And so that's what we really have brought over almost a decade, like deep domain expertise. And I think success comes from focus. It comes from being authentic about, the problems we're trying to solve. It's about knowing when to walk, when to run, when to sprint. It's the balance of all of that. And I think that compounded with, a strong strategy, great investors, and an evolving market have been a number of the reasons why I think we've been so successful.
Agreed.
And we are where we are today.
There were three primary thoughts that came out of SRS in my book, and one was the big push on AI. The second was the telesurgery push,
Yeah.
and then the emerging robotic platforms. And it was really interesting the fact that it was in Europe. You had quite a few coming in from the APAC region, and you got to see, even in just 1 year, the acceleration and maturity of the soft tissue format, large format robots on the floor.
Absolutely. And maybe I'll kind of address those, maybe last first. It was really interesting to see, just the breadth of the soft tissue robotics opportunities. And also, moving from perhaps what was more the expected, the large, big robots that come in to do the, thoracoabdominal surgery, things like that, where you were also seeing the more specialist robots, your Horizon for ophthalmology, your MMI for microsurgery. I mean, one of my all-time favorites, Histosonics, like just what an incredible technology, incredible team, incredible impact. To imagine a world where, you could have incisionless surgery, or incisionless procedures for these patients was really, really exciting. And then, of course, you had the category that was not trying to compete with the big category, gorillas, but actually finding an area and a gap in the market that was more specific, like your moons, your distals, that sort of more hybrid lap to robotic, which, in a number of specialties still can be hugely invaluable and in a number of markets, both overseas and in the ASC market. So I think they all came out to play. They all had great positioning, and it was really exciting. And I think for us as Proximie, we've been so fortunate to have been deemed a really critical part of these companies' journey. I mean, a lot of these, I think this concept that you could have an unconnected robot is no longer accepted. There's an expectation that every one of these solutions is going to be digitally enabled, edge to cloud. And obviously, we took a decision 2 years ago to build an SDK because our platform, we own it down to the bare metal. It's all proprietary, fully owned IP. We can be very flexible and be a great partner to these companies that are so focused on building the robot. They don't need to be also stressing about how do I build my digital infrastructure with all the decisions that have to be made around that? How do I just bring this in and build on top of it? And so we made obviously 2 announcements at SRS on that. One, of course, working very closely with Histosonics in terms of our partnership with them, but the other, of course, with Imperative Care, where our SDK is in the Telos robot, also enabling, telesurgery for stroke care, which is obviously life-saving. So I think it was really great to see the breadth, the variety, and we continue to play a really important role there where we believe we can be the interoperable, enabling acceleration technology, the digital arm for these companies.
Yeah.
So I think that was my sort of perspective on at least the breadth of robots and I think where we're there to play. But I can chat about the other topics as well.
Yeah, and just on the partnership model is, and I think we had chatted about this last year, is too many companies make it the 2 or 3 VP problem is they bring in a first VP and says, we can put this on board. We don't need an outside partner. And then that crashes and burns and the VP ends up being the casualty of his or her decision. The second one comes in and tries to fix it. And then they finally say, we should just get that partner. And then they eventually
And several million dollars later in, they're like, oh no, now what? And we see this consistently. And look, it's not uncommon to have that initial resistance because, engineers want to build it themselves, right? But I think what we have found is this really happy medium where, and because we white label, there's it's not a brand issue. It's actually just how do we enable you to move faster? Like focus on getting your robot through FDA. Let us help you. And because we're modular, we're open architecture, OEMs and providers can take that infrastructure and build on top of it. So we're not saying don't build, but we're saying don't build what exists, like take it to the next level. And because we've been very thoughtful about how we link into their QMS, how they go to FDA with our product, how you do all of those pieces, it's been a really great partnership with the companies that we've worked with. And, I think just on the back of SRS, we have at least like 10, 15 other companies that are having similar discussions with us. So we're excited. And I think my message to anyone on the earlier journey of building a robot, trying to think about edge to cloud connectivity, real time communication tooling, model deployment, etc., come talk to us because we can really, really help you move quickly.
Let's talk about the AI because that was all over the place today or in SRS. I still feel like I'm there. And I've got my thoughts on AI. People are very excited about it, on board right onto the robot itself if we're going to stay in the robotic category right now. But I've had conversations with you and I wonder your thoughts. I really think it's going to start at the fringe. I don't think it's going to be on the device itself, on the surgeon, but in some cases you've got it on the device like a moon and it's actually looking outwards. And then you've got Proximie in the room looking inwards. And you mentioned access and efficiencies. Expand on that.
No, it's great. And I think what's interesting, if you take a step back and you just think about the concepts of like AI and healthcare, there's like umpteen opportunities of where you could bring AI to deliver care at the clinical decision support component, perhaps autonomous care. I mean, there's all these things one could do, but really there's a lot of low-hanging fruit where the ROI is high the impact is high and the need is high. And that is really looking at ways in which we can support workforce, ways in which we can support productivity, ways in which we can support throughput and efficiency through that, and ultimately improve access. And so what we believe and kind of how we've thought about Proximie is one, the ORs, and let's just now bring it back to surgery or the perioperative space. These are incredibly data-rich environments and have been siloed for far too long. And if you're able to, at the very least, just start, the first problem to solve is, can we capture and connect and stitch up multimodal data, imaging data, video data, room data, EHR data? That's a bit that no, that is really difficult to do. And that's the first bit that we tried to solve. Like, can we actually bring that together? Because that becomes the foundation, the data pipeline that we can start to unlock value from. And yes, of course, we could jump into, models that we have already. We own proprietary models around like face segmentation of a surgical procedure and all those components, which are great. But actually, the immediate pain points are throughput in the room. How do I get more patients through an operating room? And today you look around hospitals, generally OR workflow and utilization is more in the 60 to 70% range on average. Higher performing ones are probably more in the 80, 85. Others, some are even publicly saying they're in the 40 to 50% range. So there's a lot of room for improvement. So start there. Like, just say in the context of SRS, like in a robotics OR, how to make sure we get through more cases. And we were able to show, by deploying Proximie's technology, by deploying our systems in the room, layering our models into those environments, because we're already in there. We already have the buy-in from the clinical teams, from the surgeons, from the nurses. What else can we do to unlock value? And we were able to show, for example, with one of our colleague ORs, they were able to move from doing 3 thoracic robotic cases to 4 cases in a day. And that might seem like not that much, but actually adding a whole case a day in a cancer case, in a partial lobectomy case, like that's huge. For hospitals, it's big. For patients, it's big. For the physician's team, it's big. And of course, there's a financial ROI behind it. And so what we've tried to do is think about, let's completely come at this as an operating system. We are bringing a solution that is giving value to healthcare workers with the real-time connectivity, the telepresence, the video capture, the data capture, but we're also bringing real-time value to the system itself. A system that is probably started to grow skeptical of AI and surgery. They're like, wow, there's a lot of nice ideas, a lot of good proof of concepts out here. It feels like an innovation theater. There's a lot of, cool stuff. But how do we move from what's possible to what can work in practice and at scale and has a really immediate ROI? And that's what we've been able to do. And so currently we capture ambiently all that data in the room. We sync it with the EHR data. We leverage computer vision in the OR, and we're able to bring that information to bear, reducing documentation, reducing staff burden, and improving access and productivity.
When you think about the barriers to entry as somebody's building a new robot or a connected device, what are the hurdles they're probably not aware of or thinking of that they're going to face 6, 12, 18 months out that you've already solved those problems for?
Well, it's a number of things. And I think, one thing is, there are certain decisions that I wouldn't say are like one-way door decisions, but they're decisions that are costly decisions, and they're decisions that, you need to be future-proofing for where you're going. So, very early on in the Proximie journey, we decided, one, we had to own the whole stack. We weren't going to roll up a bunch of third-party softwares, because that creates a lot of dependencies. It creates issues around data security. It creates issues of getting into hospitals and health systems where they're comfortable with the solutions you're bringing in. If you've got, one bit of your software being hosted in India and the other bit of software hosted in Eastern Europe, that becomes a really difficult offer to convince a system when you go through cybersecurity and data protection, all of that. So those things like data security, privacy, those have to be like job zero. And so those were decisions we took early on, owning the stack, building that. Number 2 is you have to be thinking global, because my assumption is that every robotic company wants to sell globally. And so trying to build something for one market and then trying to reverse into that for a global market later down the line is really hard. 3 is, how do you build a core infrastructure, but then modular applications that may be relevant that people might want to dip into, Some robotics companies say like, we really love the telepresence, we love your media management, maybe less interested in the intelligence suite. Others might say we want the whole thing. And so that modularity and choice is really, really important. And finally, it's building it on standards that are like IoT standards, common standards that engineers can speak a common language, that it's very easy to do an integration, that they don't balk at the idea that it's going to take 6 months to do hard engineering to integrate this complex solution. And so simplicity, global footprint, data infrastructure, owning the core technology were really important decisions. And look, we know many companies have tried to do this, and they think it seems easy, and that's fine. But oftentimes they come back after some period and say, maybe we'll just pick up what you guys have built and take it from there. And we partner. Look, we don't just say, here, take it off the shelf and goodbye. We actually partner with them and work very closely with them. And it's been a pleasure to work with the companies we work with so far.
Yeah, and there's some premier companies in there as well. And then finally, look, the first half of 2025 for some was magnificent, others there was a struggle. I tend to think the next 6 to 18 months are going to be phenomenal. You know, the administration is behaving better. The tariff thing we've become inoculated to. The venture money has to flow. Capital markets are returning. What are you seeing? What are your final thoughts on what are you seeing at the industry at large, domestically and internationally, as you look over the next 18 months?
I mean, it's a great question. And like, look, undoubtedly there's volatility in the market. There's decisions that can, overnight can change things. And we're all sort of, I think, at the edge of our seats often with some of these government-wide decisions. But, what we have seen is unbelievable momentum. And I say it with true authenticity. Like, how we ended last year, how we ended the first half of this year has been amazing. Doubling. I mean, it is moving fast. We're seeing huge appetite in the market. We're having great discussions with healthcare systems. Things are moving far faster than they did, 18, 24 months ago. And so we're incredibly optimistic. Naturally, we have to deliver. We have to keep delivering. We have to keep innovating. We have to keep investing in R&D and driving it forward. But I would say, just even reflecting on our own performance, our discussions with our board members, with our investors, and with the markets and future investors, there's a lot of momentum and enthusiasm. But I think it's fair to say is the market's being selective as well. It's not just, it's not taking more of a spray and pray approach, which we probably saw a few years ago. It's being far more thoughtful around, where are the winning technologies? Show me clear business models, repeatable playbooks, scalable technologies, a clear ROI and a business case behind it. And I think we've been very fortunate of consistently being able to show that throughout that. And people often say, well, you're moving, you're shifting, you're changing. And you know this, Joe, because you've seen it. Like our deck from 6 years ago talked about this evolution. It talked about annealing the market and making the market comfortable with video and cameras and AI and components in the OR. And we talked about a world where intelligence and analytics is going to really fundamentally change the way we deliver surgery. And we're starting to really see that come to bear. So I'm excited, but I think with all things, particularly given what we've seen with the markets over the last 18 months and moving forward is, maintaining fiduciary responsibility, being thoughtful about how you spend and where you invest. And we've got a great team working with us to make sure that we do that.
Fabulous. Well, as always, I think the industry appreciates your leadership and your pioneering efforts with Proximie and the team there as well. And I'll look forward to seeing you at probably
Well, I
our next
reciprocate to
event.
you as well because what you've done for this category for the industry is incredible. Like literally, I was standing next to you at SRS, and pretty much every company was coming up to you and thanking you for all your support and your efforts. And it was amazing to see, and it's been amazing watching that both as a friend and a colleague, as a customer, as all of the above. So really, really, huge fan of the work you guys are doing, you and your team, and excited to continue working together.
Thank you. And I appreciate the time today, Nadine.
Thanks, Joe.